Yeah, all right.
Yeah, ours shouldn't take me out. This is used to like, we had a 4-hour meeting last night.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, let's see. Well, but now that it's on our show, it should be on. We don't have an enterprise version. That's
Oh, Mike's name is on there.
Okay.
Should be good, yeah. Our computer's hosting its own meeting, so there shouldn't be any problems.
Oh my gosh. Like it's not a whole lot of it. Oh, but it's still pretty good.
Oh, I will put all my family in a shame.
It actually connected the first month.
I think you said Frankie's, right?
I sent it in chat and then Susie sent it. I was in No, okay.
Margaret?
I know, stupid me.
Very good. Oh, that's a
Okay, I think we're gonna attempt to get started again. All right, so we'll go back on the record. Susie, are you there? Can you hear me?
I am, and I can hear you. Thank you
I
very much.
apologize, but we have found a new weakness in our city council.
Well, now you know, right?
So it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll start the meeting back up again, and I understand that the last couple of minutes were not recorded, so I'm just gonna summarize briefly and hope that that meets public meeting law. So we just had finished up John's presentation, and we were having some questions from the board. And Kathleen had asked a question about reaching out to some small water systems such as manufactured home parks and things. And so John, they discussed, trying to do a little bit of a outreach and marketing, trying to improve that wherever possible. And then we had some questions about scheduling these large projects, the impacts on staff. And large projects aren't necessarily more impactful than small projects, but the number of projects is potentially an issue. And John did not think that there was a staff shortage to do that work, but that definitely if we get a lot of requests, it will have an impact on staff and they'll just improve their already efficient work practices. And then I had asked a question about the board schedule, and we've talked about this before. We don't want the board meeting schedule to be an impediment. And so the board can discuss having interim meetings every month instead of every other month if that's necessary to get some of this funding out. It's a lot of funding. So I think that about covered it, what we missed. So we're going to continue. We're going to wrap up these questions and then we'll move on to the CDBG item. But Jonas, did you have any questions for John?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I'll just acknowledge and appreciate your wisdom in kicking us out of the meeting occasionally to make sure we're actually engaged and paying attention. Just a couple of thoughts, and I don't necessarily need answers to this. I think just in the interest of time, but wanted to put them on the radar for John and for staff. Obviously appreciate the process improvement and appreciate the balance of kind of getting the dollars out versus establishing stability in the funding source. I wonder, and again, not a question for that we need to necessarily discuss today, but I wonder if there's any value or even legal potential to have some sort of a contingency kind of balance or fund that could be utilized to kind of bridge that gap between some of the timing challenges that were identified earlier. So again, just wanted to put that out as a thought, if that's even viable or valuable. And then second comment is just that there's a couple references to kind of performance incentives, and just acknowledging I kind of like that model to the extent that it's accommodable administratively. Thinking about the goal here is to get dollars out the door and get projects into the ground for the benefit of the communities that are being served. I think we tend to look at financial incentives as kind of the key driver, but I think if there's other mechanisms that we can consider that looking at best practices in other states and other places that really prioritize getting dollars into the ground, just appreciate those strategies. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonas. I had one more. What was it? Oh, we have seen in previous years that a lot of projects that were awarded both design and construction funds at once came back with significant cost increases once they got to the construction phase. And I don't know how every jurisdiction is structured, but it seems to me if you break the project up into design and then a construction request, it would help with this lag in disbursement and also maybe help avoid some need to come back because the price of whatever has shot up. And I know that sometimes it's risky to design a project and not have your construction funding in hand, but I think I don't know if there's a way to somehow make that a more attractive approach so that the funding is actually 2 awards, but it's kind of somewhat comfortable for the requesting agency to do it that way.
It's certainly something we're looking at. Thank you for the question. One thing that I've seen, I'll use Oregon DEQ as an example. They provide priority. They provide design and construction contracts, but they only provide actual funding for the design portion, as we learned. But then they provide, in their administrative rule, it allows them to prioritize those projects that are coming back in for the construction money, as opposed to going back to the top of the list and saying, sorry, you just aren't, And so I'm sure there's trade-offs, because if another project that was super, was a very bad situation, and then you may not have the money for that project, but that's a model that DEQ uses that if we were to go design construction, that would probably be something we'd probably want to bring to the board as a policy consideration. If there's any immediate thoughts about that, or if you'd like to see more analysis, we'd be willing to put something together.
Yeah, great. Okay, any other questions on this issue? Okay. All right, we will move on to the CDBG presentation. And Fumi, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity. Again, for the record, my name is Fumi Shat. I am the Program Policy Coordinator for Community Development Block Grant Program for the state of Oregon. And I am going to cover a couple things. One is to update you on the current FY25 funding and the FY26 funding, and a little bit of updates from the congressional level so that we all know where things are and what we're expecting to see in the next future. So within the FY25, we have, as the state of Oregon has received about $11.7 million in funding. 11.3 will be dedicated for project-related activities. With that said, we are in the process of basically requesting for the contract to be handed down from HUD. As we all know, there is some changes that is happening in the federal agencies, many federal agencies level. So one of the updates that we just received from the congressional level and from the head office level of HUD is that there's a good news. saying that the shedding of staff has been stopped, basically. There won't be any more staff that it will be leaving the agency, so that's fantastic to hear. Granted that for the state of Oregon, we have our special CPD office in Portland that is now dwindling down to about a third of the size of before. And that covers not only Oregon, it covers Idaho, Washington, and Alaska. Oregon and Alaska. So they have a lot to cover. The next thing is for the FY26, we see the president's skinny budget. So that has been, that's a little bit of not very good news, because we all know all of the CPD program, meaning not only CDBG, but homes, HOPWA, HTF, those are being zeroed out. With that said, the update from the congressional level, the HUD Secretary, Scott Turner, has testified, basically had actually has testified in front of the Congress, I want to say last week. And the result of it is basically a good, somewhat a positive indication from the congressional level, from both sides, that really wanting to support the existing program to remain, basically remain funded. The whole idea of zeroing out the program was to push down to the state level to manage. With that said, there is no mention in regards of a possible funding coming down from the federal to the state level. Because of that, we see a lot of pushback, because there is no detailed plan on how is that going to be implemented further. So there's a lot of questions than the idea that was presented. So that was a new changes that's happening. So in that sense, we're hoping we see a more positive support movements for the FY26 funding. And so far, I think we are moving along as we have currently, and now we're coming into the next level of the development of the program, in which we are working on the state consolidated plan, which then I'm going to introduce our consultant, Frankie Lewington, to take on the presentation, and we hope we could get input from all of you into the how we're actually working on this consolidated planning approach. Take it on, Frankie.
Great. Thank you, Fumi. And good morning, Chair Bailey and the board. Thank you for carving out some time for us to talk about the consolidated plan effort. Next slide. As Fumi mentioned, my name is Frankie Lewington. I'm an associate with Root Policy Research. We are a housing research and community planning firm based in Denver, Colorado. In addition to working on consolidated plans all across the country, we also work on housing needs assessments, housing market analyses, language access planning, childcare needs analyses, economic feasibility studies, as well as fair housing reports. We are working with, in addition to Business Oregon, with Oregon Housing and Community Services and Oregon Health Authority to develop the 2026-2030 consolidated plan. Next slide, please. So this is our project team. As we mentioned, Business Oregon is administering the CDBG program. Oregon Housing and Community Services administers the Home ESG and Housing Trust Fund programs. And then Oregon Health Authority administers the HOPWA program. And we are helping to lead this team with the development of the consolidated plan. Next slide, please. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with what the consolidated plan is, but just going to provide a quick overview here. So it's a planning document required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development every 5 years as a condition of receiving block grant and formula grant funding. We use a combination of federal data provided by HUD, census data, as well as data provided by the jurisdictions that we're working with. in addition to the information that we gather through our community outreach process to help us determine the top housing needs, top housing needs for low to moderate income populations, as well as special needs populations. What are community development and public service, economic development concerns in these communities, as well as where there are gaps in supportive services for low to moderate income households. Next slide, please. So once we've identified and analyzed what the needs are, we work with our partners to develop strategies and goals to address those needs over the 5-year planning period. So components of this effort include the housing needs assessments, understanding which populations are experiencing disproportionate housing needs, the housing market analysis, understanding what's currently available in the housing market, what is needed, where there are gaps for low to moderate income populations to find housing that's affordable at their price points. And then we help ground truth all of this data that we find and analyze, again, with the information that we're collecting from stakeholders and residents through focus group conversations, surveys, meetings like this, to really put a point on what's happening on the ground. In addition to the consolidated plan, as the state is a recipient of federal funding, they are required to affirmatively further fair housing. So we are also working on a fair housing study. So we'll be updating the state's existing analysis of impediments to fair housing choice report, or AI. And as I mentioned, developing the strategies and the goals to address the needs that are identified help to prioritize allocation and funding for projects that will be paid for over the next 5 years. Next slide, please. And then again, I'm sure you're all familiar with the coverage of this plan, but this specific plan covers the balance of state. So in HUD speak, it's the non-entitlement areas that don't receive direct allocations of funding from HUD, unlike the areas that are marked in blue, cities and counties, which do receive entitlement funding from HUD. Next slide, please. As Fumi just mentioned, the fiscal year, upcoming fiscal year, these are the amounts of funding that are being received by the state of Oregon, specific to the different programs. 11.7 million again for CDBG. In total, just over $25.5 million will be received by the state for these specific programs, and this is relatively similar to the allocations that were received the previous fiscal year. Next slide, please. Just a little bit more about our community engagement approach. We've been attending different public meetings and hearings. We had a specific public hearing to kick off the consolidated plan process in late April to gather preliminary housing needs, community development, service needs from residents and stakeholders throughout the state. We currently have 2 surveys out in the field, which I'll provide a bit more detail on this next slide. Stakeholder consultation as required by HUD. There are certain partners and organizations and entities that we are required to consult with. We just wrapped up focus groups with a variety of stakeholders. We had 6 different focus groups that touched on housing development and affordability, housing and service needs of special needs populations, as well as economic development needs. We've already hosted a few resident focus groups throughout the state. So we had 2 focus groups with residents in transitional housing out on the Oregon coast. We also hosted a focus group with residents living with HIV and AIDS in Lane County. So we have a few more resident focus groups that we'll be hosting to get more perspective and information. And then just like this, standing meetings, we're attending several different standing meetings to just provide an overview of the plan, where we're at in the process, and then help to gather feedback. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have 2 community surveys out in the field right now, one administered by Business Oregon, the other by OHCS. The OHCS survey is designed more for stakeholders working in the fields of housing and community development, social services, fair housing and advocacy. The Business Oregon survey is more targeted at those at the municipal level, so town, city, county managers, planning staff, community and economic development staff to better understand the community needs of smaller cities and the rural areas in Oregon. So there are QR codes there to scan to take the surveys. And we also have a flyer that's out promoting the survey. And I'm sure if it hasn't been done already, Fumi will follow up with direct links to the surveys for you all to take as well as to share with your networks. Next slide, please. So before jumping into a few questions for the board, I just wanted to stop there and ask if there are any questions. And I should say just on the plan process timeline where we're at right now. So we are kind of pushing our community engagement right now through the summer, concurrently developing the consolidated plan, and we anticipate having a draft of that later this year, early into next year. And then working with Business Oregon, OHCS, and OHA to refine that draft and then prepare it for the 30-day public comment period that's required by HUD, as well as hosting another public hearing in the spring of 2026 with the anticipation of submitting it to HUD by May 15th of 2026. So we're relatively early in the process. But that's just a little bit more of the schedule and where we're headed. So before I jump into the discussion, just wanted to leave space for any questions from the board.
Anyone have any questions at this point? Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah, you mentioned that the HUD office was a third of its previous size. Was it a 75% loss of staffing, or did I misunderstand that
Yes,
number?
there's 75% loss of staffing.
Thanks. That will be hard to keep up the same amount of work, I imagine.
Yes, yes. And that's national wide also. So it's going to be interesting.
Jonas, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And Fumi and Frankie, thank you for the presentation. Look forward to the rest of the discussion. I guess my question is thinking about kind of the outreach and engagement. Do you also typically talk to the kind of representatives within those entitlement cities and counties just to get the kind of perspectives on what's worked and where they see challenges that may also be impacting those non-entitlement areas?
Yes, absolutely. So we worked with Business Oregon and OHCS to develop just a master stakeholder list. And so for those stakeholder focus groups that I mentioned, we opened the invitations to all organizations statewide. So there were a handful of organizations from the Portland metro area that joined those conversations, as well as a few from Marion County, I believe. So even though that the plan is covering the balance of state, we're still hoping to get perspectives throughout the state, regardless of entitlement status.
Great, thank you.
Okay. I think that's it. So carry on.
Great. Well, thank you. Well, I just have a few quick questions here. And then, as I mentioned, the community survey provides more space to expand on these questions. But just curious to kick us off, what is, since the last consolidated plan, the 2021-25 consolidated plan, I'm thinking about the areas that you live or serve in. What is one significant housing or community development change that you've witnessed or experienced?
Anyone? I guess I can start. The thing that I think that we've noticed here is in addition to issues with housing for low income families, the availability of affordability of housing for many income groups seems like it's gone away. So we have problems with first-time home buyers, or people who are just in the past previously could afford a starter home. Now, starter home prices are exceeding their ability to get that, which just then cascades effects down. So that's something that we have here probably everywhere as well. Jonas, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, well, I think there's certainly been a shift, and I've witnessed the shift in recognizing and maybe thinking about this, but I just think it's an area that still needs some focus, is really thinking about the spectrum of kind of houselessness to sort of support systems and temporary housing, and then a pipeline to permanent housing. That I think plays into Chair Bailey's comment that, there then is also sort of a break there as well, with sort of entry-level housing and low to middle housing. So I think there's certainly been an enhanced recognition of that spectrum and that sort of steps in the pipeline. I just don't know that the funding mechanisms necessarily support that connectivity. So that's just my observation. Thank you.
Thank you.
This might be getting into the weeds a little bit, but I guess from the perspective of a water provider, the concept of middle housing and the way we treat middle housing from the perspective of how you service them with utilities has changed, over the past some time, where you might previously see that category of housing being provided by one single service connection. And so they get, maybe multiple units will have, a shared utility bill. There has been a change to unique metering to each of those units. And it's just a transition in the way that we treat middle housing, and a transition in the way that I think that the customers might see the cost of living and the cost of their bills come through. So just an observation.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll just make a quick comment, like since you asked about questions, like for the city of Tillamook, like we can't, there's no way to have housing unless the city can upgrade their water and sewer to get it to their wastewater treatment plant. There's things that just haven't been maintained forever. But the way that our water is set up is that the city is the provider for the water, and there are 12 special districts that buy from the city. And it's just an interesting thing, because it limits all of those water purchasers. So just being able to try to develop industrial items because the city's water, it's just super complicated. So community-wise, the housing is one thing, water and sewer are another, but they're all very, very much layers of the onion. So this is super complicated with stuff like that.
Okay.
Great. Maybe in the interest of time, I kind of separated out the questions initially in the PowerPoint, but kind of just to build upon what's already been said, thinking about public infrastructure, public facilities, or public services that you think are needed or needed to be improved in your communities, kind of building on the comment just made about the city of Tillamook and the need for water and sewer infrastructure. What other types of, again, facilities, improvements, infrastructure, or services are needed in your communities, or that you would like to see improved?
Go ahead.
One of the struggles we also have within Tillamook County is that there's just not enough fiber optic to get to the arterial areas. So it comes in along the rail line, and then it's gone to some other areas, but there's a lot of gaps. And until that, when COVID hit and everybody went to online school, it was a lot of buffering for what was available at that time. So that's one of the biggest ones. I know in Tillamook, we also, the county needs a new courthouse because theirs is outdated, and the way that they bring people in for court kind of overlaps with how the judges enter, and they've been trying to get a new courthouse built for a long time. But that's specific to Tillamook. I don't know if that impacts any other, besides the general housing comment that Chair Bailey made. So.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Kathleen.
I'm Frankie. I work for a private foundation that serves rural Oregon. So we hear from a number of communities, and the needs generally, in addition to housing, is water, wastewater infrastructure, fire halls, and need to build new ones or renovate existing because new equipment can't fit inside the old buildings. We do hear about city halls and county courthouses as well, fairgrounds.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, so my utility operates in a relatively low income and urban community, and looking at community surveys from that area, just predominantly they need green space, they need recreational space in those areas. That's something that is lacking and is very much wanted in that community.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like that's it.
Great. And then just a final question for you all. How would you like to see these challenges and needs addressed in the consolidated plan? Again, you all are intimately familiar with the CDBG program and helping to guide funding priorities there. Yeah, for this next iteration of the consolidated plan, how would you like to see the challenges that have been articulated today addressed?
Well, I mean, looking at the description of what the consolidated plan is supposed to do, it seems like the concerns in general development and gaps in supportive services those seem to float to the top in my mind as things that nobody else pays for. So, we can get like fixed infrastructure for water, sewer. I mean, it's hard, but you can find sources for that. But like the fiber optic or the broadband extension, it just seems like that's just a critical need anymore. I mean, look at this meeting. So those sorts of things that are actually trying to address gaps seems to me to be important in sort of like non-traditional, like green space. It's not a traditional thing that people go seek infrastructure funding for. It's hard to find funding for that. So is there a way to try to get some of these unusual needs addressed?
Great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Jonas has a smart answer. Go ahead, Jonas.
No smart answers, just wild questions. Yeah, I mean, I guess one thing I'm hearing in sort of the comments today is discrete pockets of projects, right? I mean, we talked about water sewer, we talked about fiber, we talked about green space, we talked about the housing spectrum. I think transportation, obviously, and I guess one of my takeaways is that's all connected. And often we have, these buckets, and I appreciate sort of looking at where the funding for where those gaps are. But I guess just would love to see that consolidated plan really emphasize the connectivity between all those critical infrastructure components and the interconnectivity between communities. The structure, funding structure often ends where our city or county borders end, but that's not where the connectivity between the people who live there is different. Now that's obviously not a problem we're going to solve in a year in a 5-year cycle, but I think just starting to put those markers down would be important in the consolidated plan.
Great, thanks, Jonas.
Okay.
Great. Well, those are all my questions. Thank you for the input provided today, and I'll make one more shameless plug for the surveys that we have out in the field. If you haven't already taken them, please do, and please share them with your networks. And I'm sure Fumi will follow up with links to those surveys as well as the project website and email contact if any questions come about for the consolidated plan or any questions about the process. So thank you again for your time this afternoon. And have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you, Humi. Okay, we're a few minutes behind. Chris, do you think you can do an agency update in 10 minutes or less?
Before you told me I had a long one. Oh, yes, I can.
Okay,
Thank
go
you.
for it.
It'll be quick. Just let me get my notes here. Since you had mentioned broadband, I just want to bring this up as a community, as a department update. Is recently the federal government changed what they'd like to see from us as far as a broadband program. That includes inclusion of like the Starlink type things and so on, as opposed to all fixed, fiber cables. And what they're doing is requiring us to redo all of our plans for the program, which is about $690 million of funding that we're supposed to get. Thing is they gave us about 90 days to do it, us and all the other states. So we're going to try our best to do it. There's a lot of political discussion, at upper levels besides me. And hopefully we can get it done in time to meet the federal government's timelines. That part of the issue that comes up with this new policy, if you will, is that it also gives the federal government they can choose any reason to deny us. They had certain language to that effect that allows them to just say, I don't like it, and move on. So we're hoping that it's not a bigger push to recapture funding from around the country. And we're gonna do our best to meet the 90-day deadline, but with that, you might see some different marketing out and about, depending on what marketing or community notices we have to do to keep that program, of course, and this almost $700 million that come with it. But directly to Michelle's point about Tillamook, that it's a perfect program for that sort of work. So that's one thing that's come up recently. The other thing is, and I know many of you maybe haven't been involved with this, but our long-term arts director resigned recently to, not really sure where he went on to, but we have an interim director right now, a woman named Leora, who's been with us for a number of years, but will be going out here soon in the next few months to look for a new director. So if you know anybody who's skilled at being an arts director, that'd be great to send my way if you want, and I can get him or her to the right people if they want to do informational interviews and so on. As far as our budget goes, there was an early release of our non-lottery bond budget. It wasn't early, it was just earlier that it was released. And some of the main things that we saw were some cuts, as we expected. We don't expect to get everything every session. But with the uncertainty around the federal government, we expect to see perhaps more cuts, but not till the next biennium, not till the next year of budget. Mid biennium, I should say. So 2026 depends on, frankly, how all the federal programs go. And some of you have read about cuts to Medicaid, et cetera, et cetera. So the state would have to pull from different departments to be able to grab that. The monies that they can grab when they do that are generally general funds, lottery funds, and other funds. So while I'm confident that our finance programs, these and our business finance programs are usually don't get touched. If there's a dire need, those are the programs, special public works, that they could take other funds from and so on. So don't think we're going to see that. I just want to throw that out there in case you start to hear anything, you could let me know. With this budget, we haven't seen recapitalization yet of our loan funds that we talk about here with this board, because those won't come out until the capital construction bill or the lottery bond bill, or sometimes even the Christmas tree bill. Christmas tree bill usually carries like the special projects like $2 million for Tillamook or Albany and so on and so forth, which tend to be lottery bond funded anyway. So we haven't seen those yet. We should see them in the next week or so, actually. There's only 2 weeks left till they have to be done. So we'll see what happens with those. I feel confident though in our funding with those programs, Special Public Works. We have some different port projects that will get funded that way, brownfields, et cetera. So we haven't heard anything about cuts to those sort of programs. Where we did see cuts are some administrative actions, like 2% vacancy rate is increased. So we'll have to keep some positions vacant for a little bit more when people leave, to make those savings to make up for other areas in the department. We received a cut in the strategic reserve fund of $1 million. So our budget was about 8 million per biennium. Now it's 7. And for those of you who don't know, the strategic reserve fund is our primary business recruitment, retention, and growth fund. So as that gets cut, we'll likely, have more pressures from communities as economy, even if that starts to change and goes south, that's when people want us to invest more in those sort of businesses, but we'll see because that was cut. The other thing that may be important to some of you in your communities, even if you don't know it, is we have a program called the Technical Assistance for Underrepresented People's Program. I know it doesn't really flow well, but we just call it TA, Technical Assistance Program. It's kind of like funding that we do for SBDC, but it's for more culturally specific organizations, the Hispanic Chamber, rural serving organizations, Black American Chamber in Portland, and others around the state. But that was cut out, that was zeroed out. So that was about $4.5 million. I suspect that we'll see that back in because there's been a very big push from around the state to get that funding back in our budget. But along with everything else in our budget, we won't know what happens until a week or two. And then, sorry, if you give me one more second. Oh, and then just looking out forward, we haven't really had any other changes to the department. Normal, normal attrition, but not a lot of folks here or there went on to get better jobs. Of course, they loved us so much it was hard for them to leave, but they still found the more money compelling in some cases. But generally speaking, we see a great workforce in our department that's remained steady. As a matter of fact, we had a all staff yesterday, and one of the folks has been there 40 years, right? Since they, were born or something, since she graduated high school, I think. But so we continue to see that. And our recruitments, when we do recruitments, we're seeing a huge scale up in the amount of applicants that we're getting. And a lot of them are coming from the federal government, which is unfortunate for them, but great for us because there's a lot of years of talent there that we're seeing now with our programs. That's the update. There's not a whole lot, like I said, updating in 2 weeks. If we, wanted to delay this meeting, then we'd have all the budget stuff you ever wanted to hear. But today it's all just kind of flip a coin.
Thank you. And I know we do get emails from the department when things end up being final. So I'm sure we'll see that. So thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
And you're within your time period. So good job. Okay, next, the port overview, which I'm really excited about. I am. We did this a few years ago and I learned so much about ports. So I'm excited to learn even more. So welcome and feel free to take it away.
Great. Thank you, Chair Bailey. And also thank you to the members of the board. I'm really excited to be here today as well, as much as I hate public speaking. Ports are my passion. I'm joined here with Sean Clark. He is the Executive Director for Port of Columbia County. Of course, we've got Michelle Bradley as well, Port of Tillamook. And then my counterpart at the agency, Becky Bryant, is here as well. So we've got a good smattering of people, should you guys have any questions that you want to ask. We were supposed to be joined by Mark Landauer, who's the Executive Director of the Oregon Public Ports Association, but I'm wondering if there was Oh, there he is. Hey,
yeah,
Mark.
good timing.
All right, next slide, please. So there's 23 ports in Oregon. Each port is widely different from the next. There's kind of a saying within the port community, if you've seen one port, you've seen one port. So, we have all the way from Port of Portland, which obviously is a very large entity, all the way down to the Port of Nehalem, which doesn't even have a staff because they're so small. So the needs of ports varies widely. I think as an agency, we work really hard to kind of meet ports where they are, especially for smaller ports. Sometimes you've just got one person running the whole show. So in terms of accessing funding, just from a capacity perspective, that can be really difficult. So ports are special districts. They typically have a port manager or executive director or CEO, and then a board of commissioners. 21 of our ports are governed by an elected body. And then there's 2 ports, Port of Coos Bay and Port of Portland, which are appointed through the governor's office. Ports really do have a dual mission. I think one of the biggest misunderstandings, I guess, in just the general public is that ports receive all these tax dollars. And I think both Sean and Michelle can attest that that's just not the case. They are public bodies, so they have to operate in the same way. But really, their financing has to come through revenue generating activities. The one thing that all ports do have in common, though, is that their missions flow around economic development. And in some cases, that looks like economic retention in certain communities as well. Next slide, please. So from a statutory perspective, ports are covered under ORS 777 and also 778, which is specific just to the Port of Portland. One of the things that Mark informed me of that I wasn't aware of but found surprising was that no port has been formed in Oregon since 1958. I believe that was the Port of Morrow. You can see on the side there's kind of a timeline of when different ports were organized. But really the interesting juxtaposition for me is that during that same year, 1958, there were 12 ports that were formed in Washington alone, and then another 20 since. So we're trying to do some investigative work to figure out why that is, because there are some areas that are not officially designated as ports that could potentially benefit from some of the funding opportunities that are available to ports, both through the state and the feds. Next slide, please. This is just an overview of the primary business lines that we see for ports in Oregon. As I said, no port is the same. I don't think there's any port that has every single thing listed on this list. It's typically, depending on the port and the needs of the community and their geographic assets, any number of these activities. And I don't know if Sean or Michelle kind of want to talk about some of the unique.
Yeah, we have a general aviation airport. I know Michelle has one as well, which has its own challenges for getting funding and adhering to current policies that have been enacted or changed. Trying to figure out how to keep funding it can be a challenge as you try to adhere to some of the excuse me, parameters. But yeah, that having the airport and a marina, so you have recreation, you've got business and industry, and a couple of recreation points that people really realize they think that's what you're about. Unfortunately, they don't understand the whole scope of what we're doing and how we're trying to bring in entities that want to pay taxes and bring jobs. So that's one challenge that we have is informing folks what we do and the benefits of what we do and what their tax money can be used for.
Now, I would just add also, so Sean's port with Columbia County and mine are very, very much similar, whereas he has the marina, we don't. We both have RV parks, right? You have RV?
Yep.
Yeah.
Small one.
Yeah,
Small
plus the airport, and we have a railroad, of course, which the infamous storm of 2007, FEMA disaster number 1733, took that away. I know that's, you get those where you spent 15 years of your life on it. That's destined to be the Salmonberry Trail. So we also have, within ORS 777, the ability to do recreation, but it's not our highest and biggest mission, which is industrial items. But I mean, we're fairly similar. We have multiple locations for where we have land ownership. But some of the other ports are, a marina. And so it's very, very different. But Sean, we're very similar,
Yeah.
our two ports.
Don't forget your air museum. My favorite part of the Port of Tillamook.
Well, just because you're a museum nerd.
Um, So, one of the things that I see emerging for ports is there's a growing interest in the housing situation. There is funding available through Business Oregon for, looking at development of utilities, but that's something that I'm seeing coming up more and more. And then on the right hand of the slide, you can see different commodities for our ports that do transport stuff either domestically or internationally. We're primarily an export state. We do have imports as well, but that's been what we have done traditionally in the state. Next slide, please. Oh, and I'm going to hand this off to Mr. Landauer.
Well, thank you, Margaret, and thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Infrastructure Finance Authority. Can you hear me okay?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Well, there are a couple of bills that the Oregon Public Ports Association has been involved with. One of those, well, I won't get into the bills, but there are some issues that are, of course, very important to our members as there are about three funding programs that the IFA runs and that we use in various ways. One being, of course, the recapitalization of the Port Revolving Loan Fund. That I think, along with the Port Planning Marketing Fund and the Marine Navigation Improvement Fund, all are pretty important to our members. One of the things that I want to make sure that the members of the authority understand is in the last approximately 5 or 6 years, we've seen a skyrocketing cost, as I'm sure many other jurisdictions are seeing with infrastructure related costs, is a skyrocketing cost for dredging. An example that was recently shared was a project down at the Port of Newport, which in 2017 was bidded at $375,000. 4 years later was bid at $1.2 million. So we are seeing really massive increases in dredging costs. And of course, that impacts most, if not all, of our coastal ports that are well, continue to be dredged. Now, that's not all of our ports on the coast get dredged. One example might be Nehalem Bay. However, the recapitalization of the Port Revolving Fund is obviously one of the issues that we're interested in. Senate Bill 361 was a bill that the Oregon Public Ports Association introduced this session to help many of our ports, 6 of them to be precise, with dredging costs. That bill is still pending before the legislative session. And we're not clear whether or not that'll make it to the end. It's been this budget cycle. I'm sure Chris shared with you that funding is a bit more tight this biennium, and it's probably going to be a difficult mountain to summit, but we remain hopeful on that. We introduced a bill, House Bill, well, no, we didn't introduce a bill, but we hijacked a bill in the House that was a bill just related to ports. It was a study bill, and for many years, our members have been concerned about the limit on the Port Planning and Marketing Fund, which since 2007 has had a $50,000 limit. I did a quick calculation. Since 2007, that $50,000 limit has lost 52% of its purchasing power. So we introduced we hijacked a bill that was sitting in a House committee to modify that and remove the $50,000 limit and permit the Infrastructure Finance Authority to set that limit with the hope that, of course, they will increase that limit to address the inflationary impacts that have happened. We've also experienced a substantial increase in consultancy costs for ports to develop their strategic business plans, which is a requirement under the statute. And then we continue our members, primarily the coastal members, with one exception, and that would be Michelle, because she only has a ditch. She doesn't have a marina. Our
Fish bearing
fish
ditch.
bearing, I forgot to mention why it was considered fish bearing. I believe that a elementary school introduced coho salmon smolts to her ditch.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And as a result, it is now a fish-bearing water body. Having said that, though, a number of our ports that do have marinas are really challenged by an aging fishing fleet and also, frankly, recreational vessels as well. These vessels can cost anywhere from a couple $1,000s to remove and dispose to literally millions of dollars, depending on the size, where they're located, whether or not they are floating or have sunk to the bottom of the state. There is a bill, Senate Bill 795, which will modify many of the laws surrounding the notification, seizure, and disposal of abandoned and derelict vessels. I should also note that in the 23 session, the Legislative Assembly appropriated approximately $18 million for an abandoned and derelict vessel program. And my understanding is that there still is quite a bit of funding available, but prioritizing which vessels should be going first. I would also note that we are having some challenges with the Department of DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, on getting permits to actually destroy and dispose of these vessels. This will probably be an emerging issue for our association in the coming years as well. I could mention a number of other bills, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time, and I'll make myself available for any questions that you may have. And thank you for the opportunity to be before you here today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. I think we're ready for the next slide, please. So one thing that I did want to make sure that we talk about is dredging. As Mark had just mentioned, the costs have gone up exponentially. And we're seeing that as an issue both for marina dredging, but also within the federal navigation channels. So the way that dredging works, the Army Corps of Engineers oversees dredging within the federally designated navigation channels. There's areas outside of those channels that are also necessary to maintain dredging. And that typically falls on the shoulders of the port to pay those expenses. And, you know, this is important for a number of reasons. Number one, safety, but also for access. Some of these smaller offshoots of the federal channel are necessary to get mariners back to, you know, whatever facility they depend on as part of their business structure. And I've got a little example here on the next slide. So this is just, this is from the Army Corps' website. You can see the area in red is the Federal Navigation Channel in Coos Bay and North Bend. It is a much smaller footprint than I think people sometimes think in terms of its size. But if you look at the bottom where it says South Slough, that's the access point to the Charleston Marina. So all the seafood processors that are there, and that's just one example of our many ports that we have here in the state. Next slide, please. So I did want to talk about the state-owned dredge, the Laura. The state purchased the Laura back in, I want to say 2015, and really did so because there was such an outcry from ports in terms of their ability to pay for dredging. So the intention with the Laura was to minimize those costs. So what we've typically been seeing, if a port is interested in utilizing the Laura, they'll go out and they'll get quotes from private operators, but then also from, it's managed by the Port of Coos Bay. And so they'll charge for time and materials, but we're really seeing it being like 2 to 3 times less to utilize a state-owned dredge. And at the bottom there, you can see projects that have been done in the past: Brookings Harbor, Alsea, Siuslaw, Garibaldi, and then also in Charleston. Next slide, please.
One thing I wanted to add is the Port of Columbia County actually looked at using the state-owned dredge, and for our particular project, for our marina basin, we had to transport the material almost a mile to get it upland. And there are limitations with that equipment as far as depth and then the length of distance you can pump it. So even while it sounds like a great asset to have, you also have to have your ducks in a row the year before so that you get in the queue, make sure you have all your permits. It's a little more than just like, hey, can you guys come up and do some dredging up at our marina? You got to get some ducks in a row. So
no, that's a good point. I may have oversimplified all that goes into the state-owned dredge. We have a dredge committee that meets typically on a monthly basis to look at which projects are going to be focused on for the upcoming year. And just like Sean said, that really depends on, do they have permits in place? Because that can be a very timely and sometimes expensive thing. And then do they have the funding to be able to pay to have that work done? So it ends up being a little bit like threading a needle.
let's not forget the limited in-water work windows.
Oh gosh, yeah, how could I forget? So that is another challenge that is facing ports. What we've seen at a number of ports, they all have a slightly different in-water work window, but typically they run from late fall to mid-spring, and some variation of that just depending on what the ecology is within that harbor, other factors that gets evaluated by the Corps and then cooperating agencies as well. So we've seen, like at Newport, they had their dredge window shrunk by about a week, which doesn't necessarily sound like that big of a deal, but it is for them. They have the NOAA dock there, and the time of year that they do or have done dredging in Newport aligns with when the vessel's not there. So they can get in and get the dock face, but now they can't do that. So they're having to figure out, can they get a variance or, yeah, just lots of challenges. I like to think of ports as kind of like a beautiful disaster. Like there's always something happening, and it's always exciting. Yeah. I wanted to speak a little bit about the economic benefits and needs for ports. They really, I think, I know before I went to work for a port, I really didn't understand or even close to understand the impact that they have on the communities, the districts that they operate in, and even the state. So you can see on the right there, there's some stats that came from a study that we had done that was completed in January of 2024. That was really just, it was the Oregon State University that did the work. And they surveyed all of the ports to get a sense of what their economic impact is. I think that there's indirect benefits in addition to this that are really important as well. We ran some numbers, just a plug for Business Oregon, to see, since ports have fallen under the umbrella of Business Oregon, what's been invested to date through either grants or loans, and it's north of 381 million, or 61, sorry, I miswrote my own thing. So that's pretty huge. And what we find, ports that have more resources, the state is a really important partner, but a lot of times our funding can be used as match funding for federal grant programs, which typically there's more money available for. The issue that I find, especially when talking with smaller ports, is that it's a capacity challenge. If you've got one person running the whole show, those grant applications are really, really in depth. And that's one thing that I really appreciate about Business Oregon. I think we try to get all the information we need to evaluate these projects, but we keep it simple enough that somebody's not, having to put in the same amount of work and time commitment as a federal grant, but they're really important resources. We've got a number of ports that have federal grant programs that are active right now, doing some really good work. In terms of needs, I could talk about that all day, but I won't belabor. Ports inherently are very infrastructure heavy. I think if you talk to any port in the state, you would hear, they've got docks that need to be replaced, wharfs that need work on them. And, just like everything else, we're seeing costs around that go up a lot. Anytime you want to do something over the water or in the water, it's way more difficult in terms of permitting, and the expense is, Sean's got a dock project right now.
Big one. Yeah, we have an old Army terminal that the port purchased in the 60s when the GSA surplused it. And the dock was built in 1942, and we upgraded half of it with some Connect Oregon money back in 2015-16, Connect Oregon 5. And got some current Connect Oregon money to work on the upstream and actually address the seismic vulnerability of a dock that was mainly built in the 40s. So different size ships, different size wood piling. We're trying to get a lot of that creosote out of the river and replace it with some seismically resilient steel piling and upgrade it and hopefully make it a place for resilience should there be events that happen, the Cascadia event or whatever. If we can have that site available, if it's accessible, providing Astoria Megler is still intact and ships can get up, or the next, after Astoria, we're the next stop with our terminal out in Clatskanie. So that's something that we'd like to, I like to say that infrastructure just gets older until you, the day you upgrade it and then it starts all over again, but it just gets older and you just got to be planning for it somehow to be able to work on it and or replace it. So we need help. Ours is a big project for this upgrading.
Forgive me for,
and just in terms of
I'm sorry, forgive me for interrupting, Sean. Other upgrades are due to barges running into your dock, as I recall.
Yeah. We did have November of 23 in the early morning hours, a gravel barge slipped back behind our, excuse me, behind our terminal access and took out our downstream approach. Luckily didn't rupture the pipeline that is serving for vessels that come and load renewable diesel from our facility from one of our tenants. But yeah, we had a near miss major disaster there and had it put back together with some emergency permits and things. So our tenant would ship a product again within 3 months. So now we have to address the rest of that dock, make sure that it's gonna hold up for seismic.
Yeah, I actually showed up at your offices the morning that happened.
Fun day.
Yeah. So yeah, in terms of cost, just for scope, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, we're looking at 60 million total, and of course we're doing that in phases. We're trying to get some federal funding, but like everybody, I think we're looking for a steady and besides our tax that is paltry, a steady source of funding somehow. Either roads have their source of funding, seems like rail does, ports we're kind of looking for scraps sometimes, it feels like. So
agreed. Okay, I think next slide, please. So here's just another breakdown. You'll see the chart on the left also came from the work that OSU conducted for Business Oregon. And you'll see at the top, it's really trying to preserve what we have to make sure that it can, continue on into future generations because we have so much infrastructure. And then also, making sure that ports are suited to encourage new business development. in the areas that they serve. That's something that all ports are trying to do in one way or another. If it's a small port, then maybe that means, expanding on an RV park or updating docks. For larger ports, a lot of times those projects can be much bigger. And I am seeing that they're branching out into other areas that weren't necessarily always things the ports worked on either. So I think that's about all I had, but happy to answer any questions. I've got my illustrious group of fellow port people. So, but yeah, happy to. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
One quick correction, and I would love for OSU to be able to take the credit for doing the study, but it was University of Oregon.
Oh,
so
oops. Okay.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Go Beavs.
Okay. Anybody? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add a few things. I'm looking later in what's in the packet here for the infrastructure, cash and commitments. And if I wasn't a port that used a lot of these funds, I wouldn't really pay attention to this. But you see the revolving loan fund, the port planning and marketing, and the marine navigation fund. So you see three things on there. Our port, which is outside of the city limits, also has our own water and wastewater. So it's a little different with that. So we use the SPWF, we use the water wastewater fund, the straight safe water drinking revolving loan fund. We've used SRF before. We've used the OBDD business or match for FEMA projects in the past. I don't know is that still a thing? Oh, okay, a portion of that. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that some ports can use. And then it's just really interesting because most of the ports, I believe, are you in city limits?
We have 5 cities in our port district, and also a lot of unincorporated areas. So we're that anomaly. So.
And then another thing I just wanted to mention from what Sean's comment was about his paltry tax base. Ours is ridiculously low. It's about $60,000 a year. That doesn't even pay for our audit. So our port, even though we're a public entity, like that doesn't cover a person with benefits. And so we have to truly operate like a business. And it's hard to do sometimes as a government without that support. So I know I rely heavily on Business Oregon, and thank goodness for Becky, because she does a lot of that heavy lifting for us. So, and Melanie Olson too, by the way, superstar. But I just wanted to kind of add some context to that it's not just port, marine, because Mark Landauer's on here and he always knows I'm the exception to the rule on almost everything. But
it would be nice if somehow, because we know all of our tax rates were set at one point, and we have compression issues to factor into. But those numbers for ports taxation, their authority has not been looked at for a long time. It would be helpful if we could have a collective look at those and see how we could raise those enough to actually make a difference for some. Like, I know I said my number's small, but her number's way smaller than ours. So yeah, we could get almost 500,000 when our tax is levied. And I think she's in the 60,000.
yeah, about 60,000.
So
and then there's like the Port of Nehalem, which doesn't even have a full-time person. They have a rock in the river, and theirs is 600,000 or 700,000. Because if you look at their houses, I'm in farmland, unincorporated farmland. So sometimes it's very disproportionate.
Yeah.
Chris is shaking his head.
Could I?
And I know one time we actually looked at doing a consolidation. Senator Johnson said, can we do Port of Garibaldi, Port of Tillamook, Port of Nehalem? And the study said apples, oranges, and bananas. So that was a non-starter. I would have loved to have Mike's money and Nehalem's money.
Could I add just a couple little tidbits on that? First of all, ports are statutorily limited in the amount of property taxes they can impose. I think it's something like around 0.1%. So from a statutory standpoint,
and that's the valuation of the port district. Is that correct, Mark?
yes.
Okay.
So I think it's a really small amount. The other thing that I thought I would mention, and I know both Michelle and Sean are familiar with this. One thing that's interesting is at the federal level, special districts aren't actually recognized as a government structure. And so we have been working for the last, since frankly the pandemic, of trying to get the federal government to recognize special districts. And I think there are around 10,000 of them across the country. And this would be important because, and there is legislation. In fact, Senator Merkley introduced legislation this week that would recognize special districts and thereby make them eligible for other federal programs that occasionally send money to local governments. As you know, during the pandemic, cities and counties received, as well as schools, received direct funding from the federal government to address funding shortfalls caused by the pandemic. Special districts in the state of Oregon received nothing, yet special districts oftentimes were the frontline responders to pandemics, whether it be a healthcare district or a fire district or water and sewer were frontline responders as well. So we continue to work at the federal level as well to get our special districts and ports recognized as local governments, at least at the federal level. So thank you again.
Anybody else have any questions? Jonas?
No questions. Appreciate the great presentation. And thanks for all the work that goes into this.
Thank you.
I always learn something about ports. And there's still a little bit of a mystery to me, but I just have a couple of questions since we have a minute or two. Somebody mentioned that there's some attempt to link ports to the recent focus on housing. And I'm just wondering what that looks like.
It's really, port specific. Like I'll give you an example. I know Cascade Locks has some interest in potentially, the funding, at least through Business Oregon, can't be used to build the housing, but some of the utility work that might make it more attractive to a potential developer. But in the case of Cascade Locks, when the pandemic hit, people were moving out of Portland because it's beautiful and it's only a half hour away. And, there was a lot of people working from home. So their workforce can't necessarily, or would have a difficult time supporting like a big industrial project. They've looked at this in the past, but their population went from like 1,200 people to 1,500 people in a very short amount of time. So they just don't have housing. So, yeah, I hear stories like that occasionally. Again, it varies depending on the port and what the demographic in their district looks like, but.
Yeah, another really super good example is frankly the Port of Morrow. The Port of Morrow, of course, is located in Morrow. It doesn't have a huge population, but the port itself has approximately 15,000 jobs, and they have been struggling mightily with workforce housing. A lot of their employees that work at the port actually commute from Richland, Pasco, and Kennewick, Washington. And so the port has really focused on constructing workforce housing on port property as well as adjacent properties. So when you drive by the Port of Morrow, you will see housing stock having been built there, and it's primarily to address their workforce housing shortages. So that's another really good example.
And the challenge there is you're potentially taking industrially or commercially zoned property out of inventory to make that room for housing, which you desperately need. So the trade-off is there's a very little amount of industrial land available in the state to develop on. So securing it is for that purpose is paramount for ports.
Yeah, and same with my port. We have 1,600 acres it just came with the Navy leaving the Naval Air Station, and a lot of it is not developable. It is topographically challenged. There's no water, sewer services to it, but it'd be okay for housing, but we are zoned M1 industrial. So it's a challenge with DLCD for a lot of the foundation stuff to be changed, but we don't want to give up our industrial land either, because that is
Trades.
it could be
Work some
used.
trades.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? That was great. I
Awesome.
love
Thank you
hearing about
again.
ports.
If
Yeah.
you're ever down at the Port of Columbia County and you want to see what we do, I could take you for a tour. Any of you stop by and
Yeah,
see us.
we held a meeting in Coos Bay and we got to, to talk about their port. So that was great. It's really interesting. Oh, we went to Charleston Ice House, 100%. That's very cool. I mean, ice, like who knew? Okay, well, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you for your time.
That was great. Okay, that brings us to the end, and I can't believe we made it. Jonas gets a prize for hanging in there. Being what said, oh, Jaime, welcome back. Sorry, you've missed just about everything. Okay, so let's see, end of the meeting today. I just want to make a note. Our next meeting is unusual because it's Monday, September 8th, which is odd for us. And we'll be in Seaside, which is where the Infrastructure Summit is being held. So I think Ed or someone might reach out to us with more information about getting there and staying there. But just want to make a note that it's on an unusual day for us.
And time as well.
Right.
It starts at 9 o'clock. We will be covering rooms on Sunday night since we're starting Monday morning. And then if you plan to stay for the summit, which we hope you all will plan to stay for the summit, we're going to pick up the room for that night as well if you're going to go to the summit on Monday night. So.
And Chair, I just wanted to add that we will then cancel the August meeting.
Canceling the August meeting, is that?
And then we have the September, and then we're going to turn right around and keep the October meeting. So.
So no
keep
August,
bringing it
but
up.
yes, September and October.
Correct.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, somehow we managed to finish on time. So thank you, everyone. And apologize again for the technical difficulties, but welcome to Albany. So and with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thanks.
Thanks all.